if I were to recommend the study of Kabbalah, I would recommend the books written by Ze'ev ben Shimon Halevi. He has written many books. If you Google the Ledano tradition of Kabbalah, that will certainly give you all the information on Halevi's work.
Now, Toledano suggests to me something to do with Toledo in Spain. Is there some sort of story connected with how Kabbalah found its way into Spain?
Well, when the Romans kicked the Jews out of Israel, part of them went northeast into Russia and became the Ashkenazis. Part of them went across the top of Africa and up into Spain, and they became the Sephardis. And until the Christian reconquest of Spain, at the start of the Renaissance, the Muslims and the Jews cooperated very well, and the Toledano tradition gets its name simply from the fact that there was a substantial Kabbalistic community in that part of the world, and it's the teachings of that community are pretty much those that are found in Halevi's work.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you showed the conference how the emblems of the officers of the lodge could fit on the tree of life in such a way as to suggest the ascent of the spirit, it suggested that not just that system, but that other systems might also lend themselves to being placed on the tree of life in the same manner.
Well, it seems to me that the ascent up the central column of the tree is the mystical ascent, as represented by Kabbalah. In principle, any system which represents a mystical ascent could be placed there, but how many stages there are in any system is up for grabs. It just happens that in the Masonic system, there are the same number of levels.
Now, when we say number of levels, what are the names of those numbers of levels? Starting with the lowest, let's say.
In which?
In the Kabbalistic world.
In the Kabbalistic world, well, let me see. The lowest Sephiroth on the tree is Malkut, and then immediately above it is Yesod, and I would put the central nervous system. Sorry, if the tree of life that we're talking about represents the psychological world,
Mm-hmm.
then Malkut represents the central nervous system. Yesod represents the ego. Immediately above Yesod is a triangle of Had, Netzah, and Yesod, and that is the phenomenon of feeling. Above that, Had, Netzah, and Tiferet represents the triad of awakening. And Tiferet, I would say, represents the level of the self. Above Tiferet is the triad of Tiferet, Gevurah, and Chesed, and that represents the soul. Tiferet, Chochmah, and Binah, that's the triad of the spirit. And then, Keter, Chochmah, and Binah represent the divine triad, because on the extended tree, that triad touches divinity.
So if on this ascent, let's say the Mason is traveling up the central column, are we teaching with this consideration about Kabbalah that it's possible to reach God himself directly?
I would not say that. My understanding is that God is beyond existence, that God wills itself into existence as, and at the moment he wills himself into existence, this existing part of God is what we call divinity, which is less than the completeness of God. And in the reaching the divine triad of the psychological world, you only become conscious of divinity. You don't embrace all of it itself. So you become conscious of the divine presence, but you're not becoming one with the deity.
Well, Masons deal with God in several ways, one of which requires that they attest to belief in God in order to apply for membership in the Masonic Lodge. And then, at another part of the entered apprentice's experience, he's asked in whom he puts his trust, the expected answer being in God. I guess my question is, how does this relate to, if it does, the explanation you just gave as God on the tree of life in the sphere of Keter and beyond, for that matter? What does a Mason believe in when he says he believes in God within that context?
Well, for me, when a person says he believes in God, he believes in the existence of the divine being. It's not feasible for us to know what that means in its entirety, because we cannot know God. It's too big for us to know. What was the next part of your question?
Well, the question had to do with, for a Mason to say he puts his trust in God.
Puts his trust in God. For me, to put one's trust in the divine, in God, means that having committed oneself to search for the communion with deity, and to open oneself to the divine presence and to the goodness, divine agency of deity, then divine goodness will guide one in one's activities and prevent him from falling into difficulties.
Well, would it be possible for a person to truly say then that he goes beyond believing in God and actually has a direct knowledge of God? Or is God even beyond that? I don't know.
Well, a person can certainly say he has a direct knowledge of God, and for some people, I think this is without doubt the case. I would be, if someone told me that he had a direct knowledge of God, I would expect his life to demonstrate the experience of the divine presence. I think it is possible that one can know God. For a person to say he does know God is an unusual event. I would think it would be unusual.